Well, hey everybody, thank you for checking in once again and welcome to another episode. Which 35mm film camera would I use if I could only use one from now on? That's today's episode. Now, I've shot many film cameras, so I couldn't possibly include them all, so I've drawn up a short list of 1, 2, 3, 4, about 15 cameras to choose from. We've got rangefinders like this one, we've got SLRs like this one. So which 35mm camera would I choose if I could only use one from now on? So let's go through the shortlist. Well, first on the shortlist, let me put my glasses on so I can see what we're talking about. Let's have a look at some rangefinders to begin with. And we've got one or possibly two, depending on how you look at it. Beautiful little rangefinders to begin with. And those are a pair of Barnack Leicas, and these are very beautiful little cameras. This one's a 1932 Leica 2, this one is a 1936 Leica 3. This one has slow speeds, this one doesn't, it's just got 1 second to 1/500. This has 1 second to 1/500 plus slow speeds all the way down to 1 second, half a second, quarter, eighth, 20th, all the usual slow speeds, plus a time and a bulb setting on this camera and a time setting on this camera. They're beautiful little cameras and I've used them quite a lot. They are very beautifully made little things. The engineering that's gone into these things is really astonishing. It reminds me of the kind of engineering you'd find on a steam engine, but it also manages to be very minimal, very small and very beautiful as well. If you get one of these cameras, the best thing to do is get a lens that folds up and collapses so you can theoretically put it in your pocket. This one has a rather large lens on it at the moment. This is a smaller lens, around about the size of the Elmar. It's actually an Industar lens, and you can see that when they collapse, they really are tiny little things. They're very simple cameras as well. There's really nothing to them. There's a rangefinder, a light tight box, a lens, and a shutter speed setting. And they're very simple to use as well. They're really, you know, once you get into these cameras, they look complex and awkward and slow, and they are slow, there's no doubt about it, but they're not complex and they're not awkward. And once you get into the rhythm of using one of these, it just all sort of comes together as second nature, so they're nice and easy to use as well. They're not the cheapest of cameras. A body will cost 150 to 200. A camera with a lens will cost maybe 350, 400, or maybe a little bit more if it's a particularly sought after version. Zorki and FED versions are cheaper. They're identical copies made by Zorki and FED in Russia and the Ukraine respectively. And those are lovely little cameras as well. They're absolutely identical to these in every respect. These have an L39 lens mount, so you can shoot all the lovely old Leica lenses, all the lovely old former Soviet lenses on them, and they're just beautiful little things. So these, the Leica 2 and the Leica 3, the Barnack Leicas, I would have to choose one if I went for these, but the Barnack Leicas are definitely on the short list. So what's next on our rangefinder odyssey? Well, next we have, now where's it gone, if I can find it, we have the wonderful, absolutely fantastic old Zorki 3. This one is from 1955, and this is a, whoops, drop my glasses, this is a really nice camera. This is a fairly early one. It's got the slow speeds on the front, just like the Leica did. There's a later version with all the speeds combined on top. Those are a bit more reliable, but these are reliable too. If the slow speeds get sticky, all you need to do is swill out the bottom of the camera with lighter fluid and those slow speeds will free up. That's what I had to do with this one. It's a very, very good looking camera. I think it's a fantastic piece of industrial design. It's much quicker than the Barnax as well to use because it's got this combined rangefinder and viewfinder. So it is quite a bit quicker than the Barnax to use. It's a simple camera, it's just manual, there's no more complexity than the Barnax have, so it's very simple to use. It's also simple to repair should it go wrong, and eventually every machine will go wrong and need a bit of servicing. These are fairly simple, as are the Barnack Leicas, which I ought to have mentioned. And this one looks really cool as well. I think it's a very cool looking old camera. They're not cheap. One of these will cost you 150 to 200 pounds, maybe a little bit more because they are so rare. But it might well be this one, the camera that I choose to use may well be this one because it's so cool and it's so unusual. We've also got somewhere the Zorki 4, which is one model on from the Zorki 3, that at least that's what my knowledge of mathematics suggests. And this is in fact the 4K. This is the 4K version, and this has a lever wind. The Zorki 4 has a knob wind, which actually is a little difficult to use. It can be a little bit rough on your fingers. This one has a lever wind. It's very nice and easy to use. It's got a big clear viewfinder, combined rangefinder and viewfinder, and it's a lovely, lovely camera. It mounts all the L39 lenses, so it can mount Leica lenses, former Soviet lenses, Reed, Seagull, anything else with the L39 mount. It's not quite as nicely made as the earlier Zorki, as the Zorki 3, but these are fairly reliable. They do go wrong, but you know, they're old cameras now and they've not had a lot of servicing, quite a lot of them. So they'll be as reliable as any other, you know, LTM, like a thread mount rangefinder, I would imagine, because they've got that Leica DNA in there and the mechanism is very, very simple and pretty simple to repair. It doesn't have strap lugs, but they can be added, as I've done with this one. And this one is much cheaper than the Zorki 3. The Zorki 4, a good Zorki 4 or 4K, 4K is a bit more expensive because of that lever wind. You can find for between 40 to 70 pounds, something like that. Maybe a bit less if you're patient, maybe a bit more if you're not, but they are relatively cheap. That will include a lens and you'll be ready to go and do some rangefinder fun. So it might be, my choice might be this camera. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. What else have we got? Well, we've got the FED 4. Where's the FED 4? This is my original FED 4. This was the first camera that I used seriously, my first serious proper camera with adjustable shutter speeds and interchangeable lenses. All manual. It has a lever wind, which is nice and handy. It also has a light meter built in, so that is really handy and that really helps. However, you can put a little light meter, little clip-on meter onto the top of any of the cameras we've looked at up to now. You can put the clip-on meter onto the hot shoe, and that makes the cameras really a lot quicker to use, because you've suddenly turned a camera without a meter into a camera with a meter, and it sits on the cold shoe here, and it's really, really fantastic. However, this one does have a meter built in. It again takes L39 lenses. These seem to be very reliable, and they're just that bit nicer made than the Zorki cameras. The FED cameras were always a little bit nicer made than the Zorki cameras. Not sure why, but they're just that bit more polished, and you will feel that when you use them. However, the proportions are a little bit out on this one. It's a bit too tall, and it's not the best looking camera. It does have a classic camera look, so it's got that going for it. There's lots of chrome and stuff on it, so that's nice, but it's not a great looking camera, and it has only a 1/500th of a second shutter speed, whereas the Zorki, both the Zorkis we've looked at have 1/1000th. So for the rather silly reason that it doesn't really look good enough, this one is not going to be one of my maybes. This is not one of the cameras that I would choose to use if I could only use one from now on. All right, let's look at the Kiev cameras. These are also former Soviet cameras made in the Ukraine. Now, these are copies of the Contax camera of the 1930s rather than the Leica copies, which led to all the FED and the Zorki models. They're all essentially Leica copies. This one is a beautiful machine. It's very, very quiet in operation. Very quiet shutter sound. Probably the equal of this old Leica 3 here. This is in really nice condition. It's properly lubed and adjusted, and it's very, very quiet. And the Kiev equals it for silence. It's very, very nice old thing. So they're clones of the 1930s Contax. They're very elegant and beautiful, and they were once considered to be superior to the Zorki and the FED cameras, and indeed they are finished that bit more nicely. There's a focus control here on the top deck, or almost on the top deck. This one has a light meter built in. The lenses are cheaper than the L39. These use the Contax mount, of course, and they're cheaper than the L39 lenses because they're a little bit awkward to mount, and they don't have a focusing helix. That's actually inside the mount on these cameras. But they can be awkward to mount, especially if you want to mount wide lenses or long lenses on here. And the camera is complex in its construction. The shutter is composed of lots and lots of little blinds that are all sort of sewn and stitched together, and they've got string to operate the shutter. So eventually these will fail like any machine, and I think when they do, they're going to be more complex, more difficult to repair than the Leica thread mount cameras. So for that reason, this one is not on the list, although it's a lovely old camera, and I'd really be happy to use it if that was the only one I could use from now on. Okay, we've got a more modern rangefinder here. We've got the Yashica GT, 35 GT Electro, and that's a pretty cool sounding name. This is representative of 60s and 70s fixed lens rangefinders, and you'll find lots and lots of these. This is a really nice one. It's got a very, very nice lens, an f1.7 45mm lens, and it's beautiful lens. It's also got auto exposure, which is a real boon. I do like auto exposure, but the lens is fixed on here and you can't change it. And on many of the consumer rangefinders of the 60s and 70s, the same holds true. The lens is fixed and you can't change it. Also, the electronics. There's a lot of electronics in this camera. This one's working fine, but like all machines, it will eventually fail. So for that reason, and because you can't change lenses, this one is not a camera that I would use if I could only use one from now on. So that one sadly doesn't make it. So which camera is going to take the prize in the rangefinder group and go through to the semi-finals to compete head-to-head with the SLRs? Well, I'll tell you now, it's going to be a Barnack Leica. So the Barnack Leicas, for me, make it through this competition. the rangefinder section of it anyway. They're very small. There are lots of lenses, hundreds and hundreds of lenses to use. They're very beautifully made. Oh, noisy car. They're fantastic looking. They are a bit slow, but I'm really not looking to shoot quickly with a rangefinder, or indeed any film camera. If I want to shoot quickly, I'll shoot digital. So yeah, they're slow, but you can take your time and you get used to them and you just fall into the workflow very easily. They've got no meter, but you can clip a nice little one onto here, onto the top of the cold shoe here, so you can easily fit them with a meter. And they're so small, they've got the folding lenses, the collapsible lenses, and they will go easily into a bag or into a pocket if you've got a pocket big enough. So the Barnack Leicas take the prize for rangefinders, and they go through to do battle with the SLRs. All right, well now, let's have a look at some SLR cameras. Well, I'm going to begin with a favourite of mine, or rather two favourites, because they're a very similar camera. Here's one of them. You'll probably recognise these. This is the OM2 from Olympus, and also the OM1, if I can find it. Where's my OM1? Oh yeah, here it is. Right, here's my OM1. And I've forgotten to take it out of its case. So the OM1 over here and the OM2. Well, these are very, very beautiful little cameras. They are one of the nicest SLRs I've ever used. They're absolutely delightful little things. And when I say little things, they are quite small. The body is not much larger than a Barnack Leica. They really are small things, and they're smaller than pretty much any other SLR that I've ever used. So they're very, very portable little things. The lenses are generally smaller than lenses from other manufacturers, and they're very, very beautifully made little things as well. The OM1 is... Whoops, that's the wrong one. The OM1 is all mechanical, so there are no electronics on this camera at all apart from the meter, which is fine. So it's just a purely mechanical camera, and it's a very, very lovely one. They're very reliable. This one I bought several years ago, and it had lived a hard life. I haven't had it serviced. It's still working fine. They have a big bright viewfinder, lovely, lovely viewfinder, one of the best in the business. Actually, the Olympus cameras have. And the OM2 is an electronic camera. Its shutter is controlled electronically, that is the times and so on. So this one has quite a few electronics on board. It has aperture priority auto exposure and also a manual mode. I actually prefer this camera in use to the OM1 because I do like auto exposure. I just find it speeds things up a little bit and makes things that bit easier, just removes one thing to think about. The lenses are really, really high quality, and there's a lot of them. Some of them are, one or two of them anyway, are rare and expensive, but most of them are entirely accessible. The 50mm f1.8 that's on here being a case in point. On the OM2, oh, we've also got a 50mm f1.8. Oh no, we've got the f1.4 on the OM2. Come on, Nigel, get it together. There's also a 100mm f2.8 lens, which is really, really nice. So some beautiful lenses are available for these cameras, and there's some really quirky touches. The shutter speeds are adjusted by this concentric dial around the lens mount here, so they're a bit different to other cameras. The lenses are cheaper than Canon and Nikon lenses, a little cheaper anyway, and so are the cameras, in fact. These are professional quality. They were used by professionals in the day, and they're very, very nice quality machines. The OM1, however, this one, the mechanical camera is likely to survive for longer. It's likely to be more repairable. The OM2 has been very reliable so far, but who knows how long it will last? I really don't know. And I don't really fancy its chances of being repaired should anything too complex go wrong with the electronics, because where are you going to get the spares? I don't know. They're so nice, it might be either of them. I'm not going to worry too much about the electronics at this stage. They're so nice, these two cameras, it could be either of them. All right, next we have a rather similar pair of cameras, at least similar in some respects, in that one is all manual. That's the Nikon FM. And this is a beautiful, beautiful camera. And the other one is, much like the OM2, electronically controlled aperture priority auto exposure with a manual mode. Now then, these cameras, I love these cameras. I really admire them. Firstly, they are very beautifully made, and I think, to be honest, and I will be honest, they're a little bit more nicely made than the Olympus cameras. They just feel that bit more nicely finished, that bit more polished. It's difficult to say exactly what it is. There's nothing wrong with Olympus quality, nothing at all, but the Nikons just feel like higher quality cameras, and perhaps they are, I really don't know. I don't think they're much higher quality if they are. They're just lovely machines. They're strong and simple and rugged. They're very, very conventional in their approach. The layout of the cameras is conventional. The way they're made and put together is conventional. There really aren't any surprises here at all. So, in essence, these are very, very simple machines. There are some fantastic lenses available for them. For example, I've got the Nikon 50mm f1.4 on here. It's not terribly sharp, wide open, but it's a beautiful lens because it gives fantastic colours. On this one, the FM2, not the FM2, I beg your pardon, the FE, I've got an 85mm f2, and that is an absolutely gorgeous lens with a little bit of reach on it. I do like that lens very, very much indeed. Nikon lenses are not particularly cheap. Anything with that name on it tends to have a slightly inflated price compared to other cameras, but it's only a small premium that you pay. They feel like they'll last forever, but again, the FM, this one, the mechanical one, might last a little longer and might be more repairable when it eventually does go wrong than the FE, which is loaded with a certain amount of electronics. All machines will eventually need service and repair, so this mechanical one certainly will be the more repairable in the future. But I'm not going to worry about that for now because they're both in good working order, so it might be either of these. Very, very, very nice machines indeed. Very simple, very straightforward, but, you know, built like a Rolls-Royce, just fantastic quality. Another very simple, rugged camera is this one. This is the Praktica MTL 5B. But there were lots of MTL models. I think there was a 2 and a 3, maybe there was a 4. There were also LTL models. They're all essentially the same camera, with a few differences in the kind of screen that's fitted and various little differences, but they're all essentially the same. They've got an M42 lens mount. They're all manual, so they are likely to be repairable into the future. The shutter button is placed in a really good place. It's right on the front here. So I do like the placing of that shutter button on these cameras. And this one takes a similar approach to the Nikon FM. It's just a light type box with a shutter and a meter. What more do you need? So fairly conventional in their approach, apart from the front mounted shutter button. And that M42 mount can mount hundreds, probably thousands of vintage lenses. So that's a real boon in a film camera, is an M42 mount, because you get lots and lots of variety of lenses. It seems reliable so far, but I have encountered broken ones of these, and there might be a reliability question with it. It's probably simple to fix, plus they're cheap to replace if you just want to buy another one, but that won't always be the case. They will run out eventually. There is a finite supply of these machines. It doesn't feel quite as nice to use as the Nikon or the Olympus, and it's not quite as nicely finished, but it will mount lots and lots of lenses, and it's very simple, so it might be this one. And finally, we've got this beauty. This is the Canon T70, and I do like this camera very much indeed. I've used it quite a lot. It's an 80s camera, mid to late 80s, so there's much more electronics and automation on this camera than there is on any of these other cameras, even the ones with electronically controlled shutters. It's pretty much state of the art. It's as good as the technology got. This is one of the final incarnation of the, one of the final of the line of film cameras from the major manufacturers before they switched over to digital. And it's lacking only autofocus to bring it right bang up into the modern age. This one uses manual focus Canon FD lenses, and my gosh, there are some beautiful ones of those. My current favourite is this one, the 50mm f1.4. It's an absolutely delightful lens. It shoots a little bit more like a modern lens than some of the other vintage lenses, but it does have vintage DNA in there. It's got a really nice form factor. It's got this grip here that makes it really easy to use, but it does kind of like the classic SLR look. We're getting more into the sort of plasticky modern type thing, and it could even pass for a digital camera, I guess, one of these. It's not too far from the look of a digital camera. It's very, very easy to use. It needs 2 AA batteries to run, which you can find anywhere in the world. There's never going to be a problem finding batteries for this camera. No weird batteries used on this one. It's not as easy to use in manual mode or in any of the other modes apart from auto, because it doesn't have physical controls. It's got these electronic controls with a mode button for ISO and various other functions, with a little LCD screen here to let you know where you're at with the adjustments. So it does lack those physical controls, which is a shame. I do like physical controls on any machine, and this one is sort of veering, moving away from them. Nevertheless, it's a nice camera, but because it's so loaded with electronics, eventually it's bound to fail. It will, and when it fails, I think it's going to be even less repairable than the OM2 or the Nikon FE is, just because it has more electronics within it and it doesn't have those physical controls. I'm guessing it's going to have all manner of silicon chips and all sorts in there to make it work. So this is, sadly, although it's a lovely camera and I would be very happy to use it forever after, I wouldn't choose it because I think there's a reliability issue long term. It's been reliable so far, but I think there's probably a long-term reliability issue simply because it's so stuffed full of electronics. So that brings us to the overall winner Which one's it going to be? Well, this was really a very, very difficult choice. It's not going to be the Canon T70 because that's too difficult to repair. It's not going to be the Praktica, which is here, because it doesn't feel reliable enough. Frankly, it may well be, but it just doesn't feel it. It's not going to be the OM2, which is here, or the Nikon FE, because they have electronics and eventually they'll fail. Although they show no signs of giving up yet, eventually the likelihood is that they will fail. So that leaves the OM1, wherever it's got to. Where are you, OM1? Not there. Where's my OM1 gone? It's here. It leaves the OM1 and the Nikon FM. Now, it was a really, really difficult choice to choose between these cameras. The OM1 is smaller, it's not quite as smooth to use as the Nikon camera, and it's a little bit quirky. The FM is really just mechanical perfection. It's beautiful feeling thing. It's very simple and straightforward, which I do admire, and it's a very, very capable camera too. And it does feel like it might be a little bit better made, I have to admit. But I prefer the size of the OM1. It's not much smaller, but it's enough to make a difference. And lenses are less expensive also. And for that reason, I'm going to choose the Olympus OM1 as the winner of the SLR category. So that leaves us with two cameras on the shortlist, on the shortlist, the shortest of all shortlists, because it's only got two things on it. We've got the Barnack Leica, beautiful, tiny little rangefinder, or the OM1 from Olympus. Which one's it going to be? Well, I'll tell you. The 35mm film camera that I would use if I could only use one is this one. It's the Barnack Leica. And that's perhaps an unexpected choice. I don't know. It was a very, very difficult choice to make because the OM1 is certainly, in the final analysis, a more capable camera. It's much more modern, its lenses can go closer, it's quicker to use. It's probably just as nicely made as the Leica, or very, very nearly. So in the final analysis, it's more capable, but I've chosen the Barnack Leica because it's smaller. It's smoother to use. It's really, really buttery smooth to use. This one's been CLA'd not long ago, and it's absolutely beautiful to use. I think it's a nicer looking camera. This is a classic piece of 1930s industrial design. Yes, they're slow to use, but I don't shoot film for speed. If I want speed, I'll go digital. It's not quite as capable a camera as the OM1, but if I want capable also, I'll go digital. And as I said earlier, once you get used to one of these cameras, all the little movements and processes you have to make to take a shot becomes second nature, and you forget the fact that they're slow. You forget the fact that they're 70, 80, 90 years old and a very, very old design. You forget that, you know, it takes a while to choose a change between the rangefinder window and the viewfinder window and all of that. They just become second nature, and you just don't think about things like quickness and can I get the shot in time and so forth. You just photograph what the camera is capable of photographing. You adjust what you're doing to meet the needs of the machine. So this is the camera that I would keep. And that kind of surprised me, actually. I did have to think long and hard about this, and I made an honest, or what seemed like an honest decision at the time, although I might change my mind in a month or so, I don't know. But I just thought to myself, film is not a fast medium necessarily. Digital is much quicker, so you can't really consider speed when you're making this choice. And I'd be more than happy to shoot this camera for as long as I could and use this as my only film camera. They're simple, they're portable, they're small, they're repairable, and they're very, 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 very cool and beautiful things as well, and a beautiful machine into the bargain. Really, what more could you want? So I hope that episode has been enjoyable. I hope it's been kind of useful, and I hope you've enjoyed your visit to the channel. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to everybody who's subscribed. If you enjoy this channel, if you've enjoyed this video, chuck us a sub, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much to patrons for your support. That is massively appreciated. Many, many thanks for that support. Thanks to everybody who's watched, who's subscribed, who's given thanks, super thanks, or commented. I appreciate everything, so thank you very much indeed. If you would like to contribute to this channel, if you like the channel and you think, yeah, this old hippie's not doing too bad a job of keeping this old gear alive, then you can do that over at patreon.com/Zenography, and you can do that from as little as $1 per month. So that's about it from me for this time. As usual, if you're not doing anything too difficult, irksome, bothersome, or irritating next week, please do tune in for another spot of Zenography. Thanks for watching, everyone. Cheerio all.